Hey, everybody. Welcome to Circling the Bases. Hope everyone is enjoying their week. We're just a couple of weeks until we are officially into summer. And as baseball fans, it's awfully tough to, tough to beat this time of year and tough to beat how well I did that intro. Today, I am joined by a very special guest. He has written well for many publications, including Baseball Prospectus and The Athletic. Currently covers the Red Sox with his excellent Sox Outsider newsletter. Please welcome my good friend, Matthew Kory. Matthew, how are we doing today?
I'm hanging in there, Chris. Thank you for that wonderful introduction that I did not deserve, but I appreciate it.
No, you're very much deserved as well. I got to ask, I know you're a big Washington Capitals fan.
Oh, yeah.
Who are you rooting for in these Eastern Conference Finals?
Well, I think anyone but the Rangers. So whoever they're playing. Yeah. It's so funny because I feel like with hockey, like the hatred gets so intense, when you play a team and the Caps have played the Lightning a bunch of times and lost to them and beat them, and that's how it goes. But so I definitely don't like the Lightning, but I don't like the Rangers even more, and so that's kind of how that works. But I really, really love watching Colorado play. The McKinnon and Landeskog and the list goes on. Natushkin and Makar is incredible. Just watching all those guys play is a treat. So I'm kind of rooting for them.
I don't do too many hockey cards, but I sold a Makar autographed rookie card and regret it like every other day, because that guy looks like he's on his way to wherever the Hockey Hall of Fame is.
He's
his
so
skill
good.
set is so impressive. And I also, as a Kraken fan, lament the fact that Landeskog should probably be a member of this team instead of Jonas Donskoy, who is, it is what it is. But I think the rebuild is shortened quite a bit by having Landeskog. But of course, Landeskog probably preferred to play in Denver, and that's fine.
I imagine.
But I did have to ask you about that, because I do know, as a fan of the Capitals, that this is kind of a worst case scenario finale. I can't imagine that there's one that is.
Oh, the Penguins are not in it.
So that's a good point.
Penguins Flyers, I think would be me putting my head through a wall repeatedly.
There you go.
So,
So let's talk about that other team that I know that you like and have covered and have been super high on and super low on at different times. And that kind of describes,
like, within the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that kind of describes the Boston Red Sox 2022 season. This has been weird, no?
Yeah, it has been. It's a bit of a microcosm of the last 10 or 15 years. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's because I'm so Red Sox focused, but I can't think off the top of my head of, maybe you can, of an organization, a baseball team that has had so many ups and downs: World Series champions, last place finishes, top 10 draft picks, Bobby Valentine. Mookie Betts is an MVP. Then they trade Mookie Betts. So it's been crazy, and this season has been crazy too. I pulled up some stats. In April, they were 28th in baseball in weighted runs created plus, 30% below league average. They hit 225, 273, 336 that month. That was, and then in May, they were the best team in baseball, best offensive team in baseball. 133 weighted runs created plus. That's a 63-point swing.
Goodness.
They hit 282, 346, 476. That's a 140-point slugging difference.
My goodness.
And it's not like they had injuries like Bogaerts, Devers, JD, Story. Everybody was in the lineup for both months. It was. I watched all of it just about, and it's very, very weird. I don't know what happened, but whatever it is, it's better now.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I'm sure it's much preferable to watch this version of the baseball team. And I will point out that, as a guy who is lived near Seattle his entire life. It's kind of funny. It seems like that Mariner series was kind of the turning point. Um, a 4-game sweep of that series where there were some close games, but it was
Yeah.
very clear who the best team in that series was. And I will say too, that is kind of the turning point of, Trevor Story, who I want to ask you about because
Yeah.
to say things did not go well to begin his time in Boston is the understatement of understatement. And you might take a look at his line and you see 229, 317, 443, 9 home runs, 41 RBIs. Not great numbers, but I don't think they're even kind of close to indicative of how good Trevor Story has been basically since that Mariner series. I have to ask you a couple of things. Number
Okay.
one, is there something different that Trevor Story has done since that
Um,
time? And two, is it sustainable? Is this the version of Trevor Story that we're going to see for most of the season? I'm making you make that prediction.
okay. Yes. So a couple things. So after April, right in early May, he switched to using a cricket bat, and that's really cut down on his strike rate. Now, there's nothing huge like that I've come across or heard anyone else find. I mean, he was so bad in April. His OPS started with a 5, and anytime your OPS starts with a 5, you don't really
Not
need to
good.
go any further than that.
No.
Like that kind of tells you everything you need to know. There are some caveats to that though, like potential reasons. He signed late, so he really didn't have a lot of spring training, and then the little bit of spring training that he had was cut short when his wife gave birth and he left the team to be with her, which he should have done and did.
Absolutely.
But that probably cut down on his preparation time for the season. And then he got sick. He didn't have COVID supposedly, but he got sick and he missed some time. And I think there was some, even though he came back, I think there was some recovery still happening during that time. So I think, the combination of that and then, moving to a new team in a new city, in a new league, getting out of the elevation of Coors Field in Denver. I think all of that probably made April extra difficult for him. I think he's probably found his sea legs, a little bit, so to speak. I think you asked, is this what we're going to see for the rest of this season? I would expect so. 250 to 275, 340-ish, 475 to 500 slugging. That's what Trevor Story does, and that's more or less what we should expect as long as he stays healthy. Which he's traditionally done for the most part.
Right.
So
yeah,
that was a good ending to my sentence right there. I thought that was
that's
awesome. The way I just trailed off and you were like, "Are you done?" I don't know what's going
that's
on.
perfect. That's almost as good as my introduction, but it was good stuff.
You and I, oh my gosh.
Yes, I tend to agree, and I think that there are maybe he was a little bit a victim of expectations. It's tough to say that when your OPS begins with 5, like you said, you can't say it's too much about expectations. I would say the most encouraging thing here is that he is driving the baseball exceptionally well. If you look at Baseball Savant, he's in the 91st percentile in barrel percentage. So when you combine that with the fact that he's drawing walks, his expected weighted on base average is in the 60th percentile, 67th percent in expected slugging percentage, 76th in sprint speed. I think one of the most encouraging things here is that he's running. I was not sure how much Trevor Story was going to run as a member of the Boston Red Sox because, Matthew, you can correct me if I'm wrong. This is not exactly an organization known for letting people get that green light when they get on first base. No,
I mean, they haven't traditionally had a lot of guys with above average speed. But when they have those guys often run. I mean, we saw Ellsbury. This is digging a little bit back into the past, but we saw Ellsbury steal a lot of bases, including stealing home against the Yankees, where, by the way, where he tripped and he like basically. Have you ever run like fast enough where you kind of lose your balance because you're Well, he basically did that. He just lost his balance because he was like running so fast, and basically like belly flopped into the plate and was safe anyway. So that's just a fun anecdote. But the point is that I think they I think the Red Sox aren't against stealing so much as they're against just dumb base running
for the sake of running.
Yeah, we saw Bobby Dalbec steal a base last night in the 8th or 9th inning. I can't remember, towards the end of the game. And just about nobody expected that to happen, but it did, and he was safe by a lot, which is probably why he went. So
yeah, and that's fair. It's just this is a team that is
traditionally more of a 3 true outcome,
station to station, 3 true outcome. Perfectly, exactly said. But it's very encouraging to see, just because from a fantasy perspective, you have to love the fact that he's running.
Aesthetically,
yes.
it's kind of a more fun brand of
you're not
game.
kidding. Yeah, it is fun. The stolen base to me is the most exciting play in baseball, and it is why, Rob, if you're listening to me, limit the pickoffs. That is the rule that you've got to implement, man. If you put in the rule to limit pickoff attempts, and you start to get these guys to basically guarantee almost that you're going to see more stolen bases, you will see the quality of the game improve so much. Rob, you got my voice, or my you don't have anything. I don't know how to do this with Rob.
Well, they've talked about making the bases bigger.
Yes.
And I think that's an interesting idea, for injury purposes, injury prevention.
Right.
But I kind of don't think it goes far enough. Like I would replace the bases with moon bounces. I think imagine a guy running around, second, and he gets to second and just like ka-doing, and then just goes towards third. I think that's perfect.
One guy I think who would benefit from that is, unfortunately, a guy who actually was demoted to AAA not too long ago after having a handful of games. I want to talk to you about Jaren Duran, because
I should have thought of him when you brought up the previous thing, and I didn't.
That's okay. That is okay. He is a very fast young man, and I just saw on Twitter right before we were about to start recording an article from Christopher Smith, I believe Mass Live, that showed his arms are built like a middle linebacker, but he does definitely have a lot of speed.
You should see his dad. His dad is like a bodybuilder. He's just
interesting. So it's like a Tyler O'Neill type situation.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Unfortunately, though, not getting a chance to play now because he literally can't, since he's in AAA. But I can't help but think Jaren Duran has a chance to carve out a role with the Boston Red Sox this year. Do you agree with me, Matthew? Please say yes.
Yeah, I do think so. I think there's some limiting factors. I think his hitting has come around nicely, and I think the team is excited about that. Last season we saw, where he kind of popped on the prospect radar. We saw him hitting for a lot of power, and that's really not who he is. He's not a 40 home run guy, and
no.
I think he got aided by the small park in Worcester, the new AAA park for the Red Sox that was just built. First season was last year, and
yes.
There's apparently quite a strong breeze that blows out to right field there. So
sounds lovely.
It aids lefty hitters. Yeah, I'm sure it's very nice. So I think he got caught up in kind of that, and the Red Sox have worked to refine his approach. That is a sweet jersey over your shoulder.
Oh, thank you, sir.
And so I think he's also gone through a whole bunch of different stances and ways to hold his hands, and things have kind of evolved to the point where I think it's got to be a little difficult to hit when you're constantly switching up your hitting mechanics.
Right.
But I think he's come across something that's working for him, and we can see it in his in his stats, both home and away in AAA. And I think the issue with him is, well, two things. One is his defense isn't very good. He's got a lot of speed, but he's just not really taken to center field and reading baseballs off the bat. And
right,
like, he can make up for some of it because of his speed, but it's not great. And he doesn't really have the arm for right field. and he's not really, maybe the defense will improve. I mean, he's originally an infielder, and the Red Sox, transitioned him to the outfield. So maybe there's still some improvement to be done there, but I kind of think maybe not, which kind of limits him to left ultimately. And for the Red Sox right now, if he's a left fielder, they already have Verdugo. And if you move Duran into left, you've got to move Verdugo somewhere else. And Verdugo's foot speed has kind of gone like this since he came over from LA. And,
sure,
he was talked about as a guy who could play every outfield position. And I don't know if it's something in the water there, because that was kind of the Benintendi thing also, but both those guys kind of are left fielder only at this point. So I there's a bit of a lockup there. There's not really a spot for him in left. So I don't know how it works. They're both also left-handed, so you can't really platoon. The one thing that kind of gives me more hope is, they don't really have a long-term answer in right field.
right.
Maybe not even in center. I mean, Enrique's had a tough season in center field, or not defensively, but just at the plate.
Right.
And he's not signed after the season, so it's not clear what's going on there. And Jackie Bradley Jr. in right field, defense has been outstanding, and I think we kind of knew that coming in. And he's got flexibility defensively. They can move him to right or left. He can play both positions well above average, but not so much with the hitting. So, and he's also not signed past this year. So I think it's more likely that there's a spot for Duran long-term after the season. Then again, I could also see him moved to a team that believes in defense a little bit more.
Yes.
I kind of didn't want to say that, but that's kind of where I feel like things might go.
Yeah. It makes so much sense. As much as I'd love to see him in Boston, just because, I love homegrown players, and I think that he could make a big difference in that lineup. I think the defensive shortcomings are something to really have to keep an eye on. He's a perfect example of the fact that athleticism does not necessarily equate to good defense. It helps. It can help you. It can definitely help you rebound from a poor read or anything like that. But he's not a very good defensive outfielder, and that's a tough place to play defense. If he does get that regular chance, I'll just say this to fantasy managers around the world: you have to add him, because he has a chance to help in a bunch of categories. No, he's not a 40 home run hitter, but he's improved his strength since he came from Long Beach State so much. And I do think there is a chance that he can be a 20 to 25 homer guy and hit a bunch of doubles, especially with, I guess there's a wall.
And triples.
Yeah, and triples. Yeah, I guess there's a wall in Boston that can
a wall.
Play, yeah, well, it's like
about that.
I think it's somewhere between Waltham and I don't know any other places in Massachusetts. But yeah, I do think there is a chance for Jaren Duran to carve out a role, but it might take a trade, and it might not be for the Boston Red Sox. Weekends are better with MLB Sunday Leadoff. Coverage presented by Uber Eats. Catch the Athletics face the Guardians in Cleveland on Sunday, June 12th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, live on NBC and Peacock. To learn more, go to Peacock TV, peacocktv.com/MLB. And if you want a chance to win $25,000 on the game, download the NBC Sports Predictor app powered by PointsBet and enter Sunday's free Grand Slam Pick'em contest. I was doing so well. Matthew, we talked about the hitters. Let's talk about the pitching. And, it really kind of carried them when the offense was going down, which, as everyone expected, that was going to be the strength of the team. The guy who has been the most impressive to me, and I think it just goes without saying, is Michael Wacha.
We all knew that, though. That's why they gave him the 10-year contract.
Yeah, that 10-year contract for Michael Wacha, who has not been a role player journeyman at all as of late. Is this legit? Obviously, I'm not asking you if you can post an ERA below 2, but is what Michael Wacha is doing right now something that is remotely sustainable?
I mean, a little bit. I think that's the answer. And, we talk about like hot streaks for hitters, but we don't really talk about hot streaks for pitchers.
Right.
But I think maybe we should. And I think that's kind of what this is. Michael Wacha is a guy who, to succeed with the stuff he has, he's got to induce weak contact. He's not a big strikeout guy. He has to get, guys to swing at pitches on the edges of the zone and outside the zone. And that's what he's, successfully done so far this season. And so is that sustainable? Yeah, I think that is to a certain extent. He's probably going to throw over the next, couple months, he's probably going to throw more bad pitches, and probably more of those bad pitches will get hit than in the previous couple months, if that makes sense. I think though that's what his success has got to be. He's commanded the ball much better this season than he did last year. If you look at Baseball Savant, you can see his pitches by location, and he's managed to keep the balls on the outside of the plate and outside of the inside of the zone, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Yeah. His pitch mix is a little bit different. He's de-emphasized the cutter, some more fastballs, a few more curveballs. So I think, like you said before, he's not a sub-2 ERA guy. But I think he's a 3.5 if he stays healthy and continues to pitch well. And I think that's kind of where his, expected metrics are. But the great thing for the Red Sox is that, this sub-2 ERA, the innings already are banked. He just, they just won a game where they scored 1 run, because Wacha threw a complete game shutout. So
really impressive start. Yeah. And, it did come against a team that is not exactly playing the best baseball in the world. But if you watched Wacha pitch, and I watched a lot of that start, he pitched really well. And it's worth pointing out that, like, you take a look at the Savant page. And again, I will remind everyone that the Savant page is not predictive. It is just the metrics. It tells you how deserving he's been of what he's done right now. He's deserving. Like, his weighted on base average is 234. That is an excellent number. Expected ERA of 3.79. That's double what his actual ERA is, but very few pitchers have an expected ERA of 1.99. It takes luck to get this stuff.
The one thing. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, there's just one last stat that I wanted to point out. The percentage of pitches that are getting barreled up is his lowest since 2017, 5.6%, which is below his career average. Lower is good here, so below his career average, and well below the last 2 or 3 seasons. So I think that's indicative of how he's got to pitch and how he has been pitching.
Absolutely. And I will say this too, like, his walk percentage is in the 53rd percentile, and it's one of the worst that he's had. But I actually think that's a good thing. He is, he's not nibbling, but he is avoiding those, we talk about, we don't promote their podcast, but effectively wild is a thing. He's not wild by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not so bad sometimes to have a walk. It is better to give that up sometimes than the 2-run homer, and hopefully, you don't have a walk that preceded that. I would just say this with Wacha, if I'm have him on my fantasy roster, if you could deal him right now for a legitimate mid-rotation starter, I think I would, because I just don't think he's going to miss enough bats to truly help you win in those categories. But this is pretty legit. I think there's going to be a lot of 6-inning 2-run starts, 5-inning 2-run starts, those type of things, which, if they only come with 2 or 3 strikeouts, they're not elite, but he can certainly help you. And it's fun to see for a guy, when he was with the Cardinals, this guy looked like he was on his way to being a really, really good pitcher. And then, some injuries happened and some regression happened, but it's been fun to see. On the other side of the spectrum, the Boston bullpen, and I have to make you put on your fantasy hat here, and I hate even making you wear a hat because you have such good hair.
Thank you.
But You're very welcome. You look at this bullpen, and you have, I believe there are 5 pitchers who have picked up saves. One of those pitchers is now a member of the rotation in Garrett Whitlock. And then you have Matt Barnes with 2, also Robles with 2, Matt Strand with 2, John Schreiber with 1, and Jake Diekman with 1. What? And how? And is any of those guys going to be the actual closer of the Boston Red Sox, or is this just the situation of situations to avoid?
So you remember when Theo Epstein came in? This is, again, going way back because I'm
okay.
a certified old at this point.
Big time, same.
Yeah. But he initially, wanted to kind of do away with bullpen roles. And, the media in Boston and the fans following the media's lead kind of freaked out, everybody needs roles, and oh my gosh, and they ended up having to, anyway, whatever. They made a trade for a closer middle of the year because at a certain point you just don't want to deal with that garbage anymore. But
sure.
But I think this is a little bit that without the statement. They're kind of just getting a bunch of guys who they think can help, and maybe without the expectations and the roles. I'm not saying this is the best way to construct a bullpen, or even that this bullpen is necessarily quote unquote good.
Right.
But it's been okay.
Yeah.
And they have a bunch of guys who can come in and they can, they don't have to go to a certain guy in a certain situation, when that guy might have pitched the last 2 days. They have different guys who can come in, and guys who are rested, and they can rotate through people and pull the best guy for the best situation. And I think there's something to that. So as far as fantasy goes, it's probably pretty awful.
Yeah.
It's a bit like instead of one starting running back, you have like 6 guys.
It's exactly like that. Yeah, it's a great comp.
But I do think there is somebody who is in the bullpen now and probably has some real baseball as well as fantasy relevance, and that's Tanner Houck. I think he's worth rostering. I'm not going to really try to give anyone fantasy advice, so maybe I should not say that. Nope. But I think he's I think he's a good pitcher. He's going to get a lot of strikeouts. And Cora said the other day that they're going to use him in a 1 or 2 inning role. Yesterday he pitched in the 7th and 8th, and I think he struck out 3 or 4 guys.
Nice.
His slider is ridiculous. If you check out Rob Friedman's Twitter feed, you'll see it frequently on there. He got a guy to swing and miss at a slider, I want to say last week, that hit him. So yeah. It was quite a pitch. It started well outside and eventually hit him in the leg, and he swung and missed at it. So it was a strike. Yeah.
That's probably the guy that I would be rostering as well. And I'm glad you brought him up, just because, I'd love to talk about Cutter Crawford. I'm proud of all of my Major League Baseball sons, but I just don't think that he's going to have. He's an interesting pitcher in the long term. I'll tell you that. Let me ask you this real quick, and then I'll ask you one final question before we go.
Okay.
Let's say this bullpen continue, or, let's say that things get worse.
Hard to imagine.
Do you think there is a chance that Garrett Whitlock is moved back into that bullpen role, or is he a starter to stay?
Well, so it's interesting. I think it's going to depend on a couple things outside of his control. I think he's kind of going through a bit of a dead arm period right now, and I think that's why some of the swing and miss has gone away. I'm slightly concerned, but not too concerned with Whitlock. But the Red Sox have a bunch of guys in AAA who I think can help in the bullpen. And a lot of them are starters in AAA, but you're probably going to run up against some innings limits. So depending on where those guys slot, you can move people like Houck or Whitlock back and forth as necessary. I think the team doesn't want to do too much more of that because they've kind of bounced Whitlock around a little bit.
Yes.
But Brian Bello, or Bayo, I'm not sure, Bayo maybe, is I think he's starting to hit some top 100 lists.
Yep.
He got moved up to AAA. He's really popped this season. He had 2 10 strikeout games in his first 2 starts in AAA. He's legit. And I think, I'm not off the top of my head, I'm not sure about innings limits for him, but I wouldn't be shocked if he showed up in the Boston bullpen at some point later this year. Kind of the same story, the back part of that story for Brian Mata, who is, I don't know if he was ever a top 100 guy, but maybe, top 150 guy.
Sure.
And he had Tommy John and is working his way back, but he's been clocked at 100 miles an hour. He just had a rehab start in single A, 2 innings, but he's working his way back up. And he's a guy, I could see, in a 1 or 2 inning role. And 2 other quick names to throw at you. Frank German. He's just a reliever. He's not a starter, but he was a gift from the Yankees to take Adam Ottavino's contract last year. I think he's a, perfectly normal relief guy, but he could come up and take a role in the pen. And Josh Winkowski, who came over in the Benintendi trade, fastball, slider, changeup, basic starter. Probably not going to blow anyone away, but he's maybe a multi-inning guy in the pen. So anyway, they have a bunch of guys who can kind of come up and, maybe one of them will pop in that role. And
sure.
Then, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question or if I
you did. No, and I'm glad you brought up Bayo, because he is a guy who just made my top 10 prospect list for the remainder of the season. I do think he's going to get that chance to pitch with Boston. And if he does, not a guy I'm rostering right now, but certainly a guy that when he gets that chance, assuming he's not facing like the Blue Jays or the Yankees or something like that, I'm considering streaming, because to say he has swing and miss stuff is an understatement of understatement. And I'm glad you brought up Winkowski too, because I will always remember him as the guy who signed his first Bowmans with black ink instead of blue ink, because it's very easy to tell when you hit his card, because if you see any type of black ink, you say, oh, it's this guy.
That's funny. What?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it. What year is his?
2021 Bowman Chrome. So not the Bowman baseball in the spring, but the one that they put out in the summer version.
Okay.
Yeah, he signed all his cards in black ink, and it is very much standing out. And then real quick, also Tristan Casas, a guy that I'm considering rostering as well. He was on a minor league rehab assignment not too long ago. Do you think he has a chance to become the first baseman of this team? I know Bobby Dahlbeck swung the bat a little bit better, but not really putting up the numbers you want from your quarter infielder.
Dahlbeck's been pretty bad, and he's not a very good fielder either. So he's not even helping you there. I think
throws hard.
Yeah, maybe he's the guy you want to roster as a reliever later in the year.
There you go.
But no, I think Casas has a high ankle sprain, and so it's going to take some time for him to get back fully from that. And he was down at the alt site in Fort Myers, rehabbing. So I think there's some time for before he can get back on the field and be a contributing member. But I do think, he's such a good hitter. If you look at his AAA stats, they're fine, but they don't really pop off the page. But I have it on pretty good authority that the exit velocities are crazy, and he was, getting incredibly unlucky with batted balls. And the Red Sox are in no way, shape, or form concerned about his hitting. He's gonna hit, and he's a good defensive first baseman from what I understand. So I think there's absolutely a space given what Bobby Dahlbeck has done. This season. So I think it's a question of getting him healthy and getting him, back up to AAA and producing at, his current level or slightly better even. And then, then maybe you make that space for him at the major league level. But I don't think that's going to happen until August, or so, maybe even slightly later, depending.
It just really, I think, is going to depend. He may force the issue. If he goes on a real hot tear, or Bobby Dahlbeck might force the issue too if this starts to get real bad, because
I mean, he's already been real bad. Like
real,
he's really bad. I mean,
yeah,
tons of strikeouts,
yeah.
very little contact, very little good contact, and
It's
then not great defense. The problem is they just don't have anybody else. So he keeps
no,
playing. Like they moved Cordero over to first base, and he's not a first baseman, but he actually hits better than Dahlbeck, and he fields better than Dahlbeck. I think he's more of a role player than a kind of
for
star,
sure.
but
Yeah.
but that's how bad Dahlbeck has been, that they had to move a corner outfielder, backup corner outfielder over to help him out there.
And I would be worried about Dahlbeck going forward, just because that skill set is just, it's so much grip and rip, and you really have to have the power from him. And this was the concern in Arizona, was that whether or not that power is going to play when there is so much issues, not just with contact, but with hard contact as well. Before I let you go, I'm gonna put a theoretical weapon of some sort to your head. We'll call it a drum kit or something like that. Are the Boston Red Sox a playoff team in 2022?
I think so. I don't expect them to catch the Yankees. The Yankees have played so well.
Goodness gracious, yeah.
But the Blue Jays have really underperformed. They've been very underwhelming. The Rays are good, but not great. I think there's some space, in the AL, especially if you look at the other divisions, the way the Angels are playing, the way the Mariners are playing, the way the entire AL Central is playing.
Right.
I think the Red Sox are good enough. The hiccup that was April aside, that that they can do it. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what they do at the deadline, because
me too.
They have so many guys on expiring contracts. I wouldn't be shocked if there was some tearing down and some building up simultaneously. I mean, the list of guys who are on the Red Sox now who are likely to not be there next year is just about everybody.
It's a very interesting roster right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can get into it more if you want, but I understand we're up against it.
No, that's okay. I will say yes too. I think the AL East, I predicted this before the season, and I haven't seen anything that really changed my mind. I think they're getting 4 in, and I think either Chicago or Minnesota is getting that spot, and I think Houston is a lock. I cannot see. It's just too hard for me to see a wild card from anywhere else, to be completely honest with you.
Right.
Do I think they're 6 of the 6? Yeah, I do. I do think that, Toronto, they weren't overwhelming, but are starting to play baseball at a much better rate, partially because my sweet Vladdy is starting to hit the ball over the fence again. And Tampa Bay, love them or hate them, they're really good at this, and they kind of just figure out a way to get this done. I think the trade deadline is going to be a fascinating situation because of what you brought up. The fact that they have so many guys who are not likely part of the roster, but also could be, like, how much are they going to upgrade? It'll be very interesting to see, but they also have a very good farm system now. It was not such a good farm system a few years ago. Definitely not a good farm system because of the Mookie Betts trade, which I know you made me promise and sign an NDA and not mention it all. But that is not the reason that this farm system is good. But it's a pretty good farm system now. I will be very curious.
My sweet Mookie.
Yeah, it's like you know what? I think he's going to win an MVP this year. By the way.
Yeah. I do too.
Yeah, and good for him.
Yes.
I know we both love him very, very much, Marcus.
Always and unconditionally. Yes.
Mookie Betts, come on the podcast. Matthew,
there you go.
Thank you so much for doing this. Please, please, please tell everyone how they can get your work.
Sox Outsider at .substack.com is where the newsletter is. It's free. I do it for fun. The last couple of weeks, I have had COVID and I'm recovering, and so there's been a lot less writing than I like, but I typically write 3 times a week. And so you can go to soxoutsider.substack.com and sign up for free. And whenever I write something, it'll show up in your inbox. If God forbid you decide to go on to twitter.com, you could find me there at Matty 2000. I don't encourage that type of behavior, but that exists.
You're a good Twitter follow, I have to say. So yeah, I actually do encourage it. I just recommend use Twitter responsibly if that's physically possible. I'm
Yeah,
not
I think
really
that's
sure.
right. I think that's right. Yes.
That's gonna do it. Thank you so much. If you liked what you heard, please rate the show 5 stars. Please subscribe. Stay tuned tomorrow for Drew Silva and DJ Short for their show. You can follow me on Twitter at Crawford_MILB. And again, follow Matthew at Matty2000. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you guys soon.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for all the latest fantasy and sports betting advice from NBC Sports Edge. And don't forget to sign up for NBC Sports Edge Plus to get the best-in-class draft guides, as well as season-long fantasy, DFS, and sports betting tools that will give you the edge.